A young woman named Bonnie Hiland, who was 23 years old at the time, held a degree in nutrition and harbored the desire to use her knowledge to assist others in enhancing their physical and mental health through the use of food. Because of this, she became acquainted with Edward, a considerate and compassionate individual who encouraged her to pursue her ambitions. Bonnie and Edward's friendship deepened throughout the course of time, and the two of them started spending more and more time together as a result. They came to the conclusion over time that the way they felt for one another went beyond that of a simple friendship. As a result, they came to the conclusion that the next step was to get married. Bonnie couldn't contain her elation. After all, she was about to spend the rest of her life with a man who was just as extraordinary as Edward. The wedding ceremony was intimate, taking place in front of the couple's relatives and the people who were closest to them. The feeling that she was beginning a new chapter of her life next to the guy she loved made Bonnie feel as happy as she could possibly be. As time went on, Bonnie and Edward adjusted to married life and developed a routine together that was characterized by love, complicity, and partnership. Edward was there for Bonnie every step of the way while she pursued her career, and Bonnie was grateful for his support. Nutritionist Bonnie Hiland was a devoted professional who was committed to the health and well-being of her patients. She was adamant in her conviction that maintaining a healthy lifestyle began with a well-balanced diet. But despite all of her education and experience in the field of nutrition, Bonnie has never been able to develop a body that is sculptural. She always made sure to eat well and get plenty of exercise, but despite her efforts, she was never able to meet the aesthetic standard that society sets. Bonnie was aware that there was more to beauty than what was visible on the outside, and that her sense of self-worth could not be contingent solely on the way she looked. Despite this, Bonnie frequently experienced periods of self-doubt and irritation, particularly when she contrasted her body with that of other individuals. She made an effort to drive herself by constantly reminding herself of her core ideals and principles, but it was difficult for her to maintain her self-assurance at times. She had known even when she was quite young that she wanted to devote her life to the field of science. Her heart would leap with excitement whenever she would discover something new about the world that around her, and her curiosity would only increase over time. She was well aware that the only way to satisfy her hunger for information was to work diligently on her studies and fully commit herself to them. She spent a significant amount of time in the library, where she studied books, magazines, and articles on scientific topics. She recorded all she learned in a notebook, created summaries and diagrams, and made an effort at all times to comprehend the relationships that existed between the various domains of expertise. Her ambition was to earn a world-famous reputation as a scientist, one who is able to make astounding breakthroughs and alter the course of human history for the better. She never gave up on her ambitions, in spite of the obstacles and problems that she faced along the way. She was well aware that the voyage would be long and difficult, but she was determined to do it regardless of the challenges. Edward has never known anything other than a life of ease and refinement. His father was a city tycoon who owned multiple businesses and endeavors, and he made it a point to give his son anything he desired. He was always sure to provide for him. Edward was able to attend the most prestigious educational institutions, go to the most lavish parties, and constantly have access to anything and everything that money could buy. On the other hand, he was well aware that he would need to put in a lot of effort in order to keep the family's fortune and the status that his father's name symbolized. As a consequence, Edward got his feet wet early on in the family enterprise when he was still a child. As time went on, he gained knowledge in areas such as administration, finance, and business tactics, and eventually, he was in a position to assume leadership of one of his father's businesses. Edward was able to turn the company into one of the most lucrative businesses in the city thanks to his entrepreneurial vision and managerial talents. He was constantly on the lookout for ways to innovate and discover new economic prospects while also protecting the reputation and values of the family firm. Edward's personal life was not without its difficulties, despite the fact that he led a financially secure life. He had the impression that many individuals simply approached him out of curiosity or because of his social position because he was the son of a wealthy businessman. It caused him to feel irritated and, at times, all by himself. It was at that time that he became acquainted with Bonnie, a young nutritionist who was committed to both the advancement of scientific knowledge and the improvement of people's health. Despite the vast differences between their worlds, they grew closer to one another and discovered that they shared many similarities. Bonnie respected Edward for his tenacity and his savvy in business, while Edward was enamored by Bonnie's purity of heart and her commitment to her work. They completed each other to become a well-rounded and loving partnership that was able to triumph over any challenge. Bonnie and Edward were a joyful and ardent couple who had long entertained the idea of starting a family together. The moment Bonnie had been preparing for and looking forward to for several years had finally arrived. She found out she was pregnant. Both of them were overcome with happiness and couldn't keep a grin off their faces. They couldn't wait to feel the unconditional love for their child that can only come from being a parent and holding their boy in their arms. Bonnie poured her entire being into the pregnancy and did everything in her power to ensure that her child was delivered in good health and with a smile on its face. She watched what she ate, did very little exercise, and made sure to attend all of her doctor's visits. In return, Edward did everything in his power to make his wife happy by lavishing her with love, presents, and extra special attention. He was aware that pregnancy was a particularly delicate period and that Bonnie needed all of the love and attention in the world. He believed that she deserved nothing less. The long-awaited moment had finally arrived, and Bonnie welcomed a healthy and handsome son into the world. The sound of the infant crying was the most heartbreaking music Bonnie and Edward had ever experienced, and the fact that their eyes were filled with tears revealed the depth of their feelings. They took turns holding their kid in their arms while smelling the sweet aroma of a newborn baby and feeling the smoothness of his skin. It felt as if every bit of love and happiness in the entire cosmos was concentrated on that one fleeting moment. In the days and weeks that followed, Bonnie and Edward poured all of their love and attention into the care that they provided for their baby. They took turns doing things like changing the baby's diaper, feeding them, washing them, and playing with them. They uncovered a love that was even more profound and passionate than they had previously imagined, one that had the power to alter their lives and the way they viewed the world. The new boy who had just been born served as a representation of the couple's pleasure as well as their union. Bonnie's life began to get more challenging approximately 2 years after the birth of her kid, and she began to go through a challenging phase. She was suffering from acute postpartum depression and had gained around 30 kilograms since the end of her pregnancy. Bonnie was going through the same physical and mental shifts that many women go through after giving birth, and it was taking a significant toll on her. As a result, she was feeling depressed, nervous, and hopeless. She began to withdraw herself from the outside world and cut herself off from the things in her life that she had previously found enjoyable. In spite of the love that Bonnie and Edward had for one another, their relationship started to become more distant as time went on. As they became increasingly occupied with their respective careers and the care of their child, they had less and less time to spend together. It appeared as though the level of care and attention that had been consistent throughout the relationship had decreased, and the conversations were becoming increasingly superficial and short. The day that Bonnie found out that Edward was having an affair with one of her employees was the day that her world was turned upside down forever. She was dumbfounded and inconsolable, and she got the impression that her life was disintegrating before her very eyes. The fact that Edward had betrayed her was something she had never anticipated, and it caused her to question the love and commitment they had shared over the course of their relationship. She had feelings of betrayal, unappreciation, and profound pain. Bonnie was in disbelief for a few days, and she had no idea what she should do or how she should react to the circumstance. She shut herself off from the world and avoided talking to Edward and even thinking about the situation. One day brought about a dramatic shift in Bonnie's life when she was confronted with a circumstance that she had never before considered a possibility. When Edward arrived, she was taking care of her son at home when he told her that they had some important business to discuss. Bonnie's anxiety caused her to experience a tightness in her chest as well as butterflies in her stomach as she worried about what the future held for her. She speculated that it might be an argument or an issue with Edward's work, but she was unprepared for what he would say next. She thought it may be an argument or an issue with Edward's work. Edward confessed to her that he was having an affair with one of his staff members and that he was at a loss as to what else he could do. The information left Bonnie bewildered, and she had no idea how to respond to it. She had the impression that the floor was being yanked out from under her, and she was overcome by a whirlwind of conflicting feelings at the same time. She couldn't understand how Edward could betray the woman he loves and the kid they had built together, so she asked him how he could do it. It was at that very moment that he uttered the words that would cause her the greatest amount of pain. "Bonnie, you look like crap." Because of the way that word pierced Bonnie's heart, she experienced feelings of debasement and humiliation. She shed a lot of tears while she tried to make sense of what had happened and figure out how she might handle the situation. She had the impression that all they had constructed together had been obliterated in a moment, and that the love and dedication they had shown toward one another was for naught. When the wife heard her husband say, "I married a woman, not a whale," it felt like she had been punched in the stomach. The husband had made a pledge to love his wife through sickness and health, as well as through happiness and despair. It was an insensitive and condescending remark that caused her a great deal of pain. The husband's wife had always struggled with her weight and had attempted numerous diets and exercise routines in an effort to lose weight. She was well aware that her physique was not picture perfect, but she made it her mission to improve both her physical and mental well-being. Yet, the pressure of society and the expectation that women should have a flawless physique ended up having an effect on the wife's self-esteem. As a result, she began to feel increasingly insecure and undervalued. As soon as she heard her husband's sentence, she had the impression that all of the love and commitment they had previously shared was for nothing. She experienced feelings of disdain and humiliation, as if the outward appearance of her body were more significant than her personality, her knowledge, and the love that she felt for others. She made several attempts to convey the agony she was experiencing to her husband, but he didn't seem to grasp the gravity of the issue despite her explanations. He was under the impression that he had the authority to comment negatively on his wife's physical appearance, as though it were a flaw that required improvement. When some time had passed, the woman started to experience feelings of devaluation and lack of motivation. She started isolating herself from the outside world and withdrew from hobbies that she used to like doing but had stopped doing recently. The comment "you look like a pig" stabbed right through Bonnie's heart like a knife. She had feelings of devaluation and humiliation, as if her outward look was a defect that required correction. The news that Edward would be departing, abandoning Bonnie and their child, came as a devastating blow to Bonnie, who was left feeling hopeless and confused of how to respond to the challenging circumstances. She was perplexed as to what had gone wrong in their marriage and why Edward had come to this conclusion so suddenly. She made several attempts to get in touch with him, but it appeared that he was resolved to support her choice. Bonnie experienced feelings of abandonment and unappreciation, and she got the impression that the love and dedication they had shown for one another was for naught. After learning that Edward had been having an affair with one of his co-workers, Bonnie was filled with a range of emotions, including despair and rage. She shed a lot of tears while she tried to make sense of what had happened and figure out how she might handle the situation. Yet approximately 2 weeks later, Bonnie started having strong feelings that she wanted to make major changes in her life. She came to the conclusion that she could not continue to whine and that she needed to start taking responsibility for her own life. She made the decision to concentrate even more of her efforts on her career as a nutritionist in the hopes of assisting others and leading lives that are both healthier and more fulfilling. Also, in an effort to take better care of her personal health and well-being, she began engaging in regular physical activity. Bonnie came to the understanding that the transition would not be simple, but that it would be well worth the effort. She sought professional assistance in order to deal with her feelings, and she discovered a support network in the form of friends and family members who assisted her in moving on. She found that as time went on, she began to feel more powerful and more determined. Even after suffering such a devastating setback, she came to the realization that life still had a lot to give. She became more discerning in choosing the people with whom she would share her life, and she learned to place a higher value on the people who genuinely cared about her while simultaneously increasing her distance from those who undermined her worth or caused her pain. Edward was enjoying his breakfast in peace when he noticed a woman on the television who drew his attention. He had a hard time believing what his eyes were seeing. It was Bonnie, but she had lost 80 pounds and had a more toned form. The changes that his ex-wife had made left him astonished and incredibly impressed. She exuded an air of radiance and vitality, quite dissimilar to the woman he had previously abandoned. Edward experienced a range of feelings, including admiration, astonishment, and even a touch of envy. It dawned on him that Bonnie had unearthed the resources inside herself to make positive changes in her life, whereas he had let his own challenges and troubles to keep him mired in a rut. He sincerely regretted abandoning Bonnie and their son, especially after understanding how much more he had to give up than he had originally thought. He wondered if Bonnie had been able to move on from the anguish of the betrayal that he had caused her, and if she had discovered happiness in her life without him. He could hardly believe what he was seeing in front of him. But that wasn't the end of the surprises for him. He later found out that she was going to be the new host of the nutrition program on the regional television station. When he realized that his ex-wife had discovered a new love in her job and was sharing her transformational path with others, he felt even more amazed and proud of her. Edward devoted a significant portion of his time to daydreaming about Bonnie and the possibility of them getting back together. He had been thinking about her constantly and longed for them to be back together, but Bonnie wouldn't even answer her phone calls. Because he did not understand how to win back his ex-confidence, wife, he experienced feelings of frustration and discouragement. He was aware that he had been careless in the past and that he needed to make up for them, but he was at a loss as to how this might be accomplished. He happened to be out and about in the city one day when he spotted her. Bonnie was leading her son by the hand as they strolled along the sidewalk. He experienced a range of feelings, including excitement and astonishment, but also fear and apprehension. As Edward saw Bonnie on the street, he approached her in a cautious manner while making an effort to make amends for the errors he had committed in the past. Bonnie paid close attention to what he had to say, but she did so with a healthy amount of trepidation. Even though she could see that he had changed, she continued to nurse the wounds and resentments that had been caused by what had occurred. She had the impression that she could never again put her faith in him, at least not so easily. As Edward asked for a second chance, Bonnie remained quiet for a while until she finally responded. She was reflecting on everything that had occurred and how it had impacted her life as well as the life of her kid. The last thing she said was delivered in a tone that was resolute and unwavering. "The boy and wife you deserted are no longer available to you." Edward's heart was pierced by those words, and he was overcome with feelings of tremendous regret and sadness. He was aware that he had lost much more than he had initially thought, and that he needed to face the repercussions of the decisions he had made in the past. He was aware that he needed to apologize in a heartfelt manner, but he was also aware that forgiveness and trust were things that had to be won over the course of time and with a great deal of commitment. As Edward ran across Bonnie on the street, he endeavored to make amends for the errors he had committed in the past and to request a fresh start with her. Bonnie paid close attention to what he had to say, but she did so with a healthy amount of trepidation. She was aware that she could not simply forgive and forget everything that had taken place, and the primary reason for this was her son. She was also aware that she needed to demonstrate to Edward, in a firm but unambiguous manner, that the decisions she had made in the past had resulted in major repercussions for both of them. Bonnie addressed Edward in a forceful and determined tone. "I hope you find yourself in life and that your son can treat you well one day, but we're better off without you. We're better off without you." The impact of those remarks was similar to that of a punch to Edward's stomach, and he experienced a complex blend of melancholy and remorse as a result. After experiencing severe postpartum depression and learning that Edward had lied to her, Bonnie felt the need to make significant changes to her life. She came to the conclusion that she needed to begin taking better care of herself, not just for the sake of her physical well-being, but also for the sake of her mental and emotional well-being. As a result, she decided to focus all of her energy on nutrition, studying the topic extensively and learning everything she could about it. She came to the conclusion that a lot of individuals struggled with their relationship with food and their perception of their bodies, and that she might assist these people in feeling more positive about themselves. She began imparting her expertise and life experiences to others through the use of social media by launching a blog, where she shared photographs and wholesome cooking ideas. She developed a significant following over time and evolved into a prominent figure in the field of nutrition. Many were able to empathize with Bonnie's tale, both in terms of her struggle with depression and her journey towards self-improvement. She demonstrated that if you had the willpower and devotion to make the necessary changes in your life, you could make those changes happen. Over the course of her career, Bonnie has been invited to give talks at and take part in nutrition events in a number of different nations. She has been all over the world spreading her message on the importance of maintaining a healthy lifestyle. She demonstrated to a large number of people that it is possible to triumph over adversity and arrive at a place of contentment so long as one possesses self-love, devotion, and persistence. As a result, she became a source of inspiration. When Edward abandoned Bonnie and their child, he was well aware that he had committed a serious error of judgment. He was filled with remorse, but he was also aware that he had to face the repercussions of the decisions he had made in the past. During the course of time, he made efforts to make amends and mend fences with his son, demonstrating his dedication to evolving into a better person and cultivating a more positive and fulfilling connection with his son. His son picked up on the fact that Dad was truly sorry and eager to make amends, and the two of them started to reconnect in order to develop a new connection that was founded on love, respect, and trust. On the other hand, Edward and Bonnie's relationship has not yet been repaired. As a result of what had occurred, Bonnie was left feeling extremely hurt and resentful, and she came to the conclusion that she could never trust him again. Despite navigating the challenges that arose in her life, Bonnie continued to devote herself to the field of nutrition and to assisting others in improving their sense of self-worth. She rose to prominence in the field of nutrition and continued to give talks and take part in events in a variety of nations around the world. But she also had the impression that her life was lacking something important. She yearned for genuine affection from another person, someone who would adore her for more than simply her outward appearance or her level of professional achievement. She became acquainted with a writer who not only respected her immensely but also cherished her for the person she truly was. They began to form a friendship and soon discovered that they had a number of other interests in addition to their passion for nutrition. They eventually tied the knot and welcomed their first child into the world as a married couple. They developed a strong and happy relationship by putting love, trust, and appreciation for one another at the center of it. Bonnie came to the realization that despite the challenges that life presented, it was still possible to locate contentment with a person who loved her for who she was and accepted her without judgment. She came to the conclusion that the foundation of real love is not a shared appreciation of one another's accomplishments or attractiveness, but rather a mutual admiration and respect for one another. As a result, Bonnie and her husband established a life that was rich in joy and fulfillment together while they awaited the birth of their second child. They became a happy and united family, demonstrating that it is possible to achieve pleasure and fulfillment in life, even in the face of challenges, as long as you love yourself, are dedicated to the task at hand, and are determined to succeed. Well, if you like this story, comment your thoughts below and share with a friend. To the next.